and Star Wars' very own Jar Jar Binks, Jenny Lewin, Senior Vice President of Lucasfilm Visual Effects, General Manager of ILM, Doug Chang, Senior Vice President and Executive Design Director at Lucasfilm, John Knoll, Executive Creative Director and Senior VFX Supervisor at ILM, and Rob Coleman, Creative Director of ILM's Sydney Studios. Rob, by the way, you're joining from Sydney right now, I think, right?
I am indeed.
It's just the middle of the day, for sure. Yeah.
5 in the morning. Very happy to be here.
Hey, thank you for being here. I'm excited to have everybody gathered for this press conference. I think this is going to be really cool to hear about it. This is the second documentary in the Light and Magic series. So, Joe, I'll come to you first. Can you talk about the period of ILM's history that Season 2 of Light and Magic is covering and what its focus is?
Well, we really start this season with Jurassic Park 2. With Jurassic Park. Because it is recognized as the sort of the moment in the history of film when everything changed, when digital technology sort of became viable as a visual effects tool. So that's really where we started, and we take it right up to the present day.
And why do you feel like? Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, with the technology and the projects that ILM is working on right now.
It does cover so much ground. It's so cool to see. And why do you feel like this is such an important story to tell? And what do you hope that audiences and viewers who see this get to take away from it?
Well, one of the important stories that I wanted to tell with Season 2 was the effect that George Lucas has had on digital technology and just film itself, all his influences and the things that he's contributed to, the things he's come up with and invented and inspired. That's one of the focuses of Season 2.
Yeah, now that we're rolling, I want to tell everybody who's watching, there is a chat function. Please submit your questions. We will get to your questions in just a bit. I'm going to have a few questions of my own. I'm going to hog up a little bit of time here because I'm a geek for this stuff. But there's a Q&A function, not the chat function. So use your name and outlet and leave your questions in there, and we will get to as many questions as we can. I just want to get things rolling here because I have a few questions I'm interested to hear about as well. And there's this Light and Magic Season 2, much like Season 1, there's so much archival material and footage and things like that we see. How was all of that sourced? How much of that was preserved and easy to find, and how much of it did you guys have to really go digging to find this footage, these props, everything that you feature in Season 2?
Is that a question for me?
I think you might be best suited to answer that one.
Well, fortunately, I didn't have to do the digging, but there's hundreds and thousands of hours of archival footage. Fortunately, ILM instituted a policy years ago where they documented, all this stuff, the meetings, the sort of the casual, just the people working on the projects. It's really been helpful to us because there's so much to go through, and we can really pick and choose the moments to incorporate into the documentary.
Yeah. Rob, just before we started, I think I heard you saying that you had just gotten a chance to see these new episodes of Season 2. So I kind of want to go around based on that for everybody who's seen it so far. Rob, what was it like for you to see this footage that we just talked about, to see everybody talk about their memories of these times that are such an important part of our lives as fans, but your lives because you were all living in it?
Yeah, it's like the most amazing time capsule or time machine, to tell you the truth. To see myself... Joe and I talked a few years ago, so they've been cutting and making it for a while. So there was that separation, which is like 3 years since I last talked to Joe, and then there's all the footage of me in my 30s, which is kind of surreal to see. I mean, of course, I remember being followed around by a camera crew, and some of that footage or footage like that showed up in the DVD extras, so I know of that. But to see it all put together under Joe's direction, it was really surreal. It was literally like a time machine for me to go back, and I feel so lucky to have had that time in my life now captured, and the world can see it.
Love it. Janet, what was it like for you? Have you seen the? I assume you've
I
seen all
have.
three of these. Yeah. What was it like for
Yeah.
you to revisit this and see it brought together by Joe?
Well, I don't love seeing myself on camera, so I'll just preface it by saying that right up front. But I loved reliving this transformative time in our history. And I agree with Rob, the way Joe put together the story using the archival footage to really give you that candid sense of what was happening. You could really almost read the minds of people in the room. And it captured a moment in time that really changed the industry, and I thought it was spectacular.
Doug, I'm going to come to you next. Did anything stand out to you when you were revisiting these chapters?
Oh, for sure. No, I mean, to reiterate, I mean, it was just amazing. I mean, for one, I've forgotten a lot of that. And to see everybody, all the old faces and all the old stories, and to hear them again, just brought back so many wonderful memories. And then, it's funny because, when we're going through it, you kind of don't think about that because you're just busy trying to innovate and create and, sort of, for me anyways, fulfilling George's vision. And so I never really stopped to look back. And then, so when Joe put this together, for me, it was terrific. It was surreal in the sense that I was like, wow, that was a really special moment. I mean, something that's pretty unforgettable because we were right at the cutting edge of, a transformation for the industry. And, I have to say, it was like, I'm very grateful to be part of that.
That's so cool. And John,
Yeah, I've never worked on anything that was as well documented as those films were. And, the cameras were there capturing everything, partly because I think George wanted to make sure that things were being recorded because you never knew what meeting something really significant might happen, and that you wanted to have all that material so that they could cut together a compelling narrative from it. But the cameras were so omnipresent that you, after a little time, you start tuning them out, and I didn't even notice that they were there most of the time. So I felt like watching the documentary. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot there was a camera there when we were talking about that. So it was
Relearning
really
it,
interesting to see. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Matt, what was it like for you to revisit these chapters and see what everybody brought to ILM?
Well, the first thing that I was thinking was Doug Chang doesn't age at all. He looks exactly the same.
What's our next question? What is the secret?
There's a little mustache that's new, but
I know, but now he just looks like a cool pirate. I mean, he just doesn't age.
Oh, thank you, Albert.
And the more I was watching, I was just like, my God, this dude found the fountain of youth. And then secondly, because the cameras were so ubiquitous, I'm going to agree with John. Like, you kind of forgot that they were there. We were just doing our jobs. And I think what Joe captured so wonderfully was, and I was thinking about this today, because I just directed a video game that came out today, which was all performance capture. And I was thinking about what performance capture directing is and how we really created that during Phantom Menace. And I think what was really special about this documentary is that what you see us doing are two very important things when it comes to this. That's being in service of the story and having respect for each one of us and what we do and how we do it. And that comes from the top. That came from George. And I think what you see in this documentary is George actually giving us the respect to be the best we can be within his constraints. And all of us realizing that we have to rise to that occasion because our job is to be in service to this story. And I think this documentary captures that beautifully.
I think it also captures the vulnerability of making this project, pouring your heart and soul into it, specifically to Phantom Menace, that each of you told so well about, sort of the imposter syndrome and the daunting task ahead to create the first digital creatures and, to do the most visual effect shots that had ever been done. And Ahmed, for you to embody the performance of Jar Jar and to talk about how that was, so innovative, so groundbreaking, and didn't have the immediate appreciation that it does now. And to really have that told so well through vulnerability and honesty. And I thought that's an incredible theme that I think Joe told so well.
I definitely agree. I mean, the Ahmed, your sequence in this season 2 where you're talking about Jar Jar, that really moved me. And I mean, you open up and you get very authentic and personal and vulnerable about the experience portraying Jar Jar and some of the difficulties that came with it when people started talking about it. And in the years since then, the love for the prequels, the love for Jar Jar has really emerged and become such a beautiful thing. I'd love to hear about the experience of revisiting that time with the new lens of people really love this. This has made such a big cultural impact for Light and Magic season 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time we were dealing with a bunch of stuff, right? I think in '99 there was such a huge shift in movie making just in general, right? When digital was coming up. So there were a lot of people who were very resistant to this idea that digital filmmaking was actually going to take over filmmaking. And then there was also this idea that these digital characters were going to take away from real life live action characters, right? It's kind of the same conversation we're having about artificial intelligence right now. That was happening in '99 as well. And so there were a bunch of vested interests in this thing not working, right? Because of just the overall feeling of what was changing, right? We were moving from the 20th century into the 21st century. Everybody was, lamenting about Y2K. I mean, I remember my father collecting nickels and putting them in the basement, right? So there was this real big change happening. And when someone like George Lucas, who is, a futurist, one of the reasons why I do the futurist work I do is because of George Lucas, who knows that we have to move forward in these ways. When that person comes in and pioneers the way he comes in, there's going to be pushback. And Jar Jar was a perfect lightning rod for that pushback, right? But George also said to me and Rob, he said this to you as well, because you say it in the documentary, he was like, 20 years from now, it's going to be a different story. Said it to me at the time, and it was hard to deal with at the time. But looking back now, he was absolutely right. It's a completely different story now.
Wow. And obviously motion capture has become such an incredible, massive part of filmmaking. Has anyone come to you in the years since you were the first to do it the way you did it with Jar Jar to ask for advice, to say, hey man, how'd you do it? That stands out to you?
Yes, I'm the Tony Robbins of performance capture. One of the things that was tough for me when the whole backlash happened with Jar Jar was the fact that the thing that was overshadowed was the work. And all of us were in this for the work. And Star Wars Phantom Menace was this wonderful bubble where a bunch of really geeky, artsy people from different parts of the world, but with the same heart, got together and made something really special. And we were really focused on making the really special. And when it came out, we were all excited about the really special. So the hard part about it for me was not being able to continue that really special work, right? I really wanted to be integral in where motion capture was going because I saw the potential of it. I got so excited by not only the technological advances of it, but the art involved. And watching John and Rob create software that was based off of the input of what I performed, I just saw this entire world open up that had tremendous amounts of potential. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to contribute in the way that I wanted to contribute because of the backlash. And that was hard.
Well, here we are. We're getting ready to celebrate 20 years of Revenge of the Sith, and I think I'm glad to see you getting the love you deserve for that work. And this documentary does an incredible job of showing the love you all put in to that movie and everything that went into it. So I'm really glad. I can't wait for people to get to see it. And going off that, Rob, Ahmed mentioned the respect and George kind of leading the pack and the positivity and all that. There's a really fun sequence I saw where you and George had a disagreement. I think it was over motion capture, and you both kind of recollect it differently. You're like, oh, I don't remember it that way. When those sort of moments happened in the past, those seem like the moments where the innovation would come out, where you guys would land on something new. Can you talk about how sort of these differing opinions and things like that we see in Light and Magic Season 2 led to some of the innovation and the incredible achievements that ILM has delivered to the world?
Yeah, I think George is famous for saying, "You guys will figure it out," and John was at the front line of that. John was famously, and it's in the documentary where George is going through all the boards, and they cut to John's face a couple times.
He's got two hands going.
The realization in his face, right? The truth is we had a production meeting every Wednesday, is my recollection, with all the visual effects supervisors and producers, and then the head of production, and there was one agenda item every week. Can we get the movie done? And for months, if not a year, the answer was no. We cannot get the movie done, even though we were making the movie, because, for example, there's a line in the script that's something like, the Gungan army marches out to war. We had no crowd system. I could load maybe 10 characters onto into my software to animate it. There's no way I could do hundreds or thousands. So we'd reached out to the R&D team, and they were feverishly writing this stuff, but time was ticking. And I'm actually getting goosebumps thinking about it right now. There was a reality in my head, which is we're not going to be able to deliver the Gungan army. So the thing about ILM, and even to this day, is that it's a company made of a bunch of really smart people who sit together and say, how we're going to figure this out. And it's about innovation, but it's also about what Ahmed was talking about, which is respect and honoring and knowing that we are better because of the people we are with, and that's in our DNA. So I think it was certainly, there's heart palpitations, and you can see it both in the new footage of us talking, but also the historical footage. You'll see facial expressions. And yes, we didn't always agree with George, because I was in my head going, can we get this? I don't know how to do it that way. And then he'd say sometimes, well, you go away and figure it out, and you come back. And we would, and I would.
Janet, we talk about how innovation from within, from conversations from within, would breed new technology and art. I found it interesting how you guys talk about how Weta is the main competition for ILM, and I also think you can have evolution prompted by having somebody else who's also raising the bar, forcing you to make sure you stay on your toes. Can you talk about opening up about that in the documentary, and how to this day, everybody in VFX, whether it's practical, digital, and everything in between, forces everybody to raise their respective bars? It's sort of a rising tide lifts all ships in this environment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is one of the other themes of the series, which is that it was a transformative time for the industry and for ILM with, moving to digital, but it was also the time, the awkward teenage years of lots of competition. We'd been sort of the only game in town. Suddenly there were a lot of facilities, many of whom were started by former ILMers who, got really strong, really hungry, really innovative. And that, like you say, forced us to think of ourselves differently. We had to move faster. And I think the visual effects community is really a small community. There's a lot of cross-pollination, and people, move around a bit. None of us, actually. We've all been here for, Rob came back, but we've all been here for our lifetimes. And we work actually really well with the other visual effects companies. Weta is one of our strongest competitors, but they're also an ally. And we work together on projects, and we're inspired by each other. So I think that's a really great thing about this community.
I love that.
I always like to say Jar Jar walked so Gollum could run and the Na'vi could fly.
I love that. It's so true.
What a perfect trajectory. That's amazing.
That's what I do. I think about this kind of shit all night.
Hey, man, that's why you're directing entire mocap games now. Come on, it's good stuff. Doug, there's a sequence where you talk about how you never had proper artistic training, I think is what you referred to it as, and you sort of, it's like a run before you walk, I think, experience you had at ILM. I find that being included to be important for young artists who aspire to do the things you all on this panel have done. Can you talk about, what you hope a young artist who might not have access to proper training, like you talk about in this, could take away from season 2 of Light and Magic, and a little bit of how you taught yourself in the middle of just doing it as well?
Yeah. It's like you said, it was interesting because I thought, I saw Star Wars when I was 15, and I knew I wanted to do sort of what Joe was doing. Because I actually learned how to draw by studying Joe's sketchbook from Star Wars. Because I really didn't go to art school, and I didn't know how to do it, but I saw the people behind the scenes, and I was more intrigued by the talent behind the camera. And I really want to do that. So when I was, growing up in Michigan, I knew I wanted to do that. And I always thought, okay, if I want a job in film, I should study film. And that's what I did. So I studied film instead of going into art. And the irony was that I got my first job through my art, through doing storyboards. And I learned on the job. It's not the right way to do it, but I learned literally by looking at Joe's work, studying his work, looking at Ralph's work, looking at all my artistic heroes to learn. And I remember when I first got my job, my big breakthrough at ILM, it was terrifying because here I was at the company that I had dreamt of since I was 15. And I was surrounded by some of the industry's best artists. And the great thing was that everybody was so open and collaborative. It was like family. And it was amazing because in the art department, I could pick and choose different styles. And so that became sort of my little mini art school where I could learn specific styles and I could kind of train myself. And it's not the ideal way to learn because I developed so many bad habits because I was kind of like, stumbling through it and kind of, finding creative ways to do what I wanted to do without really understanding the fundamentals for it. It took years to kind of really break through all that. And part of my strategy was to, do homework. And one of my things was that I gave myself a year-long homework of like learning to do everything that I didn't want to, everything that I was afraid of, like character design, creature design and stuff. And the amazing thing was that year of homework was the portfolio that George saw. And that's what he hired me for. And the curious thing is, when you're applying for an art position, the way I look at it is you're like auditioning. You're like an actor auditioning for a part. And when you're hired, it doesn't mean that you're the better artist. It just means that you are the right fit. And I was thankful that George saw something in my portfolio that connected with him. And a lot of it had to do with sort of me stumbling into sort of what I enjoyed, which was combining technology with organic, with nature. And that was what differentiated myself. And, like Rob said, I didn't know the term of imposter syndrome at that time, but I suffered from that terribly. And my first year and a half with George was super stressful. Looking back, I can laugh at it now, but I was under so much stress. I could not enjoy that at all. And Joe, I don't know how you felt, but I felt like I did not deserve this. And it was kind of the strangest experience where I was just on edge at all time.
Doug, I just have to say that in the documentary, when you say, my art skills aren't that strong, everybody just rolls their eyes. It's like, come on, Doug. Here's the thing, working with Ralph on the original trilogy, I'm a designer and a little bit of an illustrator. Ralph is an illustrator, but he can also design. You can do both. And that's, Ralph and I had to work together and sort of trade ideas back and forth. You have you have both skills, is basically what I'm saying. Your art is, in a way, is way beyond what I could do. In a way, what Ralph could do. But you combine both disciplines, design and the ability to illustrate and render. So.
That means the world to me because I did not feel that at all.
Well, just don't ever say your art skills are not that strong because it's like a joke. Come on.
I think you're all great.
sort of imposter syndrome. Rob had mentioned about we weren't sure we were going to be able to get this movie done, that it just sort of seemed logistically super complicated and it was just massive. I had a whole string of artists coming to me over a whole year, like worried about like how are we gonna do this? Thing seems so big and so complicated. How are we gonna do this? And you as somebody who's kind of steering the ship, you can't show that you're worried to the crew. To the crew, you have to be full of confidence and, oh yeah, no, we got this figured out, because you want them to be reassured. So I had this whole set speech that I would give to anybody who expressed these kind of concerns of, no, let me explain how this is going to work. You have the typical show that we do that's kind of more in that 400 shot range. And these films typically have a cycle time of about a year or so. And, the first part of that, you're doing design work, you're doing bidding, you're figuring things out. And then the middle portion of that, you're on a plate shoot, you're kind of gathering all the material. And then we start developing assets and we start getting in sync with the director, kind of working through problems and figuring out what this stuff looks like, working out the techniques. And then we get our big sequence turnovers and we push through the work. And, by the time you're down to the end of that, we're pushing through those shots. There's about 2.5 months left. Now imagine that we do all those same phases, but when we get to that ramped up period and we're in sync with the director, instead of 2 months, that's 18 months. Just think about all the work we can get done. That's how we're going to do this. And the artists would go, all right, I think that makes sense. Okay. At least John has a plan. Okay, good. Okay. And they would walk away assured, and I would, I hope that works.
So far, so good. John, there's a moment, and by the way, talking about the speed and the learning this environment and everything, George is rapid firing 2 hands on a storyboard sheet. Pink highlighter, yellow highlighter. I think there's also a blue one. Can you talk to me about those moments, how they stood out to you? And I think what he was doing was, this is going to be practical, this is going to be digital.
Yeah, I think he had a blue highlighter that was for, this could be a blue screen back there. And I think yellow was something real and a physical thing we were going to photograph an actor or a set piece. And I think magenta was a CG character like Jar Jar or a Battle Droid or something. But what was going on in my head during that, I think I'd read a script already, but this was the first time I'd seen a visual presentation of the whole film all the way through that was kind of concrete in terms of, right, these are the shots and these are the contents of the shots. These are kind of what I'm expecting to see in every phase of the film. And it was, 3,600 storyboards. And we were moving through them pretty fast. And almost from board one, there were things in there that were not possible with our current tool set. So I was sort of keeping mental note of how dense these scenes were, how many characters there were in them. These are furred characters, so we're going to have fur on these. We're going to have clothing. All these characters are wearing clothing. We need to have a cloth simulation package. These vast numbers of droids. Being cut in half, so we're going to need a rigid body system for this. They're walking before this, so we're going to have a K system that can transition into rigid bodies. And I'm like writing down all of these things. I was just sort of filling up pages and pages of stuff that we didn't have any current way of doing. And it got to be pretty overwhelming. I kind of walked out of that with my head spinning of, God, this is huge. This is just massive. It's not just that there were so many things we hadn't done before, but, in large quantity. So that was...
Just to reiterate on that, one of the first things that George said when I started, because I grew up, I had spent 6 years at Island prior to working with George, and I was used to solving problems that, based on tools that we had available. And I remember during some of the earliest design brief, George says, don't worry about any of that. Just design, do pure design. Don't worry about execution. And so a lot of the stuff that we were doing, both in designs for sets, for characters, and on the storyboard that John was just saying, we were just not even thinking about, okay, don't even worry about how to do it. John will figure that out. And so that's why it's like we literally just filled everything in there that George wanted to put on screen. And then we literally will say, like, okay, I'm passing the buck over to you now. It was stressful for the first year and a half to design it all. But now it's like the execution, it's up to John and Rob. It's just like, good luck.
Then we hoisted that off onto a big R&D staff. So I would start with meetings with the R&D department, and we just go through by categories of, all right, dense scenes. We have a bunch of very dense scenes. We're going to have hundreds of thousands of characters. All right, how do we want to deal with this? And we'd start talking through ideas of, all right, well, we could do pre-animated vignettes that we do as little groups of action that we can place around. All right, that's one way of dealing with this kind of thing. And, we'd go through and we'd break them all down. Like, how do we deal with this problem? How do we deal with that problem? And each one of those problems would be assigned to individual people. And, eventually you've kind of worked through it, eating the elephant one bite at a time.
Well, all right. I'm going to open this up to audience questions now. We have a few great questions picked out, and I'm going to get through them one by one, as many as we can here before we wrap up the press conference. This comes from John Hoey with The Resistance. George told Rob Coleman, dare to be dopey, when Rob questioned if they were making Jar Jar too slapstick. When reflecting back on Ewok designs, George told Joe Johnston, dare to be cute. So over a span of 16 years, he was still daring people to do things in production. What is the most memorable dare to George Lucas gave you? And this one's for Rob.
It is the Jar Jar performance. Now, Ahmed had said earlier in this call, we were in this bubble, and that's the truth. I was in a bubble, and once I got over having my conversation with George about my stress and could I do the movie, and he told me to relax, then my focus was 100% on George. Now, I had my own personal feelings about how far we were going, and George was pushing me beyond where I thought we should be with the performance. So I listened to him. I took the note to the animators, and we dared to be dopey. Now, it was always from Ahmed's performance forward, but that really was the thing where I was like, okay, I'm feeling uncomfortable, but I'm now showing the work to the director. He's loving it. He's responding well. I trust him completely. I'm working for the Jedi Master. I'm servicing his story, his characters, his movie.
This one's from Ian Fales from Before and Afters. This is for Joe. As you started to pull together interviews, what surprises did you encounter, and what new things did you learn about ILM that you maybe didn't know before?
Well, I learned a lot of stuff about ILM. I left ILM in 1985. When visual effects were all analog, there was no such thing as digital. So a lot of this was an education for me, just to be exposed to how the digital revolution sort of came on board. But that there were a few people that I interviewed in this second season that I knew from before, but a lot of people I didn't know very well, and there were tons of surprises about all kinds of stuff. But it was really more enlightening than anything. It was. You also have to keep in mind that when you start a project like this, you don't know where it's going. A documentary and a lot of feature films are really made in the cutting room, and this was a perfect example of that. It's finding moments, it's finding individual stories in a way, sort of modular stories that can all be connected to tell a bigger story at the end. But it's definitely a voyage of discovery. Most of it happens in the cutting room.
I'll tell you right now, you found a perfect ending for these episodes, by the way. I mean, really emotional and beautiful. It was good stuff. Yeah. This is from Dominic Morin with Star Wars Artifacts. For Janet, where do you see the stagecraft technology in 5 or 10 years from now?
Ooh, that's a great question. The stagecraft technology is still something we rely on for its core purpose, which is virtual production. But we've already seen advancements in offerings for immersive entertainment that leverage some of the techniques we developed for virtual production. So some of the work that we're delivering for the Sphere for big concert experiences and, large platform graphics and so forth on LEDs are very, similar to what we were doing for stagecraft. Also, real time. Real time we're seeing being adopted more in our workflow for classic visual effects work, all the way from how we've, transformed our previs department, our virtual art department, and even our Final Pixel visual effects, leveraging those tools. So it's hard to, 5 years is a long time in visual effects. I mean, we're seeing the pace of innovation is so rapid right now. It's hard to say where it'll go, but I think one of the stories about ILM is that we build upon each innovation, and I don't see that stopping with where we are with stagecraft. I think it'll just continue to evolve.
Season 10 of Light and Magic to find out.
Yeah, exactly.
This one's from Keith Yard at Father Son Galaxy. For Doug, I'm 13 and aspiring to follow in your footsteps. What's the secret to a long, successful career at ILM, and what advice would you give the future visual effects artists and production designers?
That's a really good question because I work with so many super talented artists, and we all took different paths to success. And so there's many different ways. One, I would say go to art school if you can. I would highly recommend that. And then the other part is just, if you want to be a better artist, keep a sketchbook. Just draw every day. I still do that every day. I mean, my morning routine is I draw for a half an hour. I do sketches, and it's just for fun. And part of that is because during my day job, I don't have time to do my own personal art, and you have to develop that part of it. So it's really important. So as any student or anybody who wants to get into this industry, it's really, just do what you can to be a better artist for yourself. The second part, which is really big, is film is a collaborative endeavor. And so you really have to work well with people. And for me, I work with people that I enjoy working with. And that means, I look for character and personality first. Talent is second for me, because I rather work with a great team because I know that we will succeed versus, working with somebody who's super talented, but maybe a little bit challenging to work with. So those are my two go-to is one, get your skills, and then two, just be very collaborative.
I would like to piggyback on that a little bit, just to say two things, one of which is at ILM, kind of what Doug is saying, I'm just going to reinforce, we hire for potential. We don't always hire the person with the advanced skill set. We're looking for artists. We're looking for that culture, personality fit, like Doug described. The other thing I'll say is that, we have lots of opportunities to get in on the ground floor. I started as a temp in the purchasing department. John Knoll famously has rejection letters pasted to his office door. So just keep trying and looking for opportunities. We have a really great Jedi Academy program for training, for technical training, artist training. We have internship programs. So there's lots of different ways to get your foot in the door and start building a career.
Great question, Keith, and good luck on that journey. I can't wait to interview you one day. This is from Vitor Carvalho with MAD, and this is for all or whoever wants to be the first to answer. With season 2 of Light and Magic diving deeper into ILM's innovation, what's one groundbreaking VFX technique from the last decade that you believe doesn't get enough recognition today?
I'll start that by saying that one technique that doesn't get enough recognition is model building. I think there's still a huge scope for practical model building when it is the appropriate and cost-effective method to achieve a great shot, a great sequence. And I think we touch on that in season 2 with John talking about I think it's the pod race model, or other the volcanic model in Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's all about what is the best technique, and the most cost-effective technique to use for any particular shot.
Anyone else have one they want to add? We got time for a few more questions here. But
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the LED volumes have really been pretty valuable to us. It's a really good solution for situations where you need to do dynamic lighting in particular, that we didn't really have a good way of doing previously. And in a way, it's taking image-based lighting, which has been part of computer graphics for a couple of decades now, but bringing that back into the real world, and it's a very powerful tool.
Yeah, I agree with that, John. And I think there was sort of a boom where there were tons of volumes and it was really being embraced. And it's now kind of retracted a bit. I think there's a perception that you have to have a big budget to use an LED volume. And actually, we're finding the application is much more towards the lower budget projects, commercials, pickup shoots, things of that nature, as well as the bigger blockbuster type projects. So I think it's still a great tool in the toolbox. It's not a magic bullet necessarily, but something that I hope we can continue to leverage.
There's also emerging things that I think are very exciting and have a lot of potential. Neural rendering fields, in particular, I think are a really cool way of representing imagery.
what is a neural rendering field?
It's sorry. You might
We're out of time now.
Yeah, you might hear a term called Gaussian splats, and these are essentially a point cloud that you can derive via photogrammetry type techniques, but the points have a color associated with them that contains, let me describe it, view-dependent shading information.
Oh.
So they
Obviously.
this is hard to describe easily.
That's exactly what I was.
Anyone ever wanted to know what it's like working with John No? This is what it's like.
All right.
Yeah.
And it's very wonderful.
That's amazing. Okay, so this is from Brian Young, full of Sith. For Joe Johnston, being one of the original hands at ILM from the beginning, what made telling this era of ILM storytelling important to you to imbue this season with so much unvarnished passion? These episodes were really terrific and did a great job of showing how much George really pushed the panel and the art form forward.
Well, I think that the reason Imagine asked me to direct this the second season was that even though I had really nothing to do with this technology or any of these films that were made, except a couple that were mine, was because I was an insider in a different age, a completely different age, the analog age, and I think it allowed me to have sort of a unique perspective on ILM then as compared with ILM now. I mean, that's my assumption anyway. So, did I answer the question?
I think so. I think what you did in the work also answers that question. What you did with these episodes. So that is all we have time for today. I want to thank everybody for their questions and being a part of today's press conference. Joe Johnston, Rob Coleman, Janet Lewin, Ahmed Best, John Knoll, Doug Chang. Thank you guys so much for your time and for your incredible work and contributions to cinema and this documentary. So I can't wait for everybody to see Light and Magic Season 2. It's been my honor to be here with you. My name is Brandon Davis, and we will see you soon, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.